where did they come from? But typically when people talk about pyramids, they're talking about three pyramids on the Giza plateau in Egypt. And interestingly, the largest of those is called the Great Pyramid, and it's not the one that people show in the pictures, because the Great Pyramid does not have a capstone. It's flat on top. That capstone was lost at some point in history. There's another one of the three that does have a capstone, and that's the one that the news anchors and television and movies, they always call that the Great Pyramid, and it's not. But there are so, I mean, we could do a whole program on the mysteries of that single structure alone. It's over 400 feet tall. It is made of massive blocks of limestone. When I was there, I went back in 1989, and there was a scientific group that was trying to recreate the Great Pyramid. And the first thing that they discovered was that none of the equipment, they were using Caterpillar tractors and forklifts and things like that. None of the equipment that we had at that time could lift the blocks, the 20-ton blocks of the pyramid. So they had to go to the Caterpillar tractor company and have commissioned them to build a special device that they then could use to build the pyramid. And after 6 months, the Egyptian government told them to clean up their mess and go home. They simply could not replicate the technology. The way, when we see that pyramid, what we're seeing actually is a part of the structure that was never meant to be seen. So there were essentially three layers of the pyramids of Giza and the Great Pyramid. The outer layer was encased in highly polished limestone, looked like marble, white, that would have reflected that light in just a magnificent way. And there are only a few layers of that left on one side at the bottom, because it has been stripped away for convenience, used in other buildings throughout Cairo, in other mosques, and other primarily in other mosques and other structures that are there. So what we're seeing now is the inside that was never meant to be seen. And these are the tiered limestone blocks, and inside of that was built around the rooms themselves are granite, the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, massive, 50, 60, 70 ton blocks that are so highly polished. We can't do this with our technology today. They're less than 1/1000th of an inch of tolerance between the stones. There's no mortar holding these together, and they've been there for centuries. The mathematics involves the mathematics of circumference of the Earth and the diameter of the Earth and the Earth's relationship to the moon, our relationship to the magnetic fields of the planet. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So the question is, how was it done? And obviously these were not primitive people that were doing this. So when I was there in 1989, another scientific group was there, and they were given access. This is the only time this has ever happened. They were given access to the casing stones that we see today and permission to drill core samples into those casing stones, because when you do that, you're destroying the stone. So, I mean, part of it. So obviously it's not happening a lot. So they took the core samples, and I was a geologist. What you would expect to see if these were naturally occurring limestone blocks taken from the surrounding limestone in the area, there's a lot of limestone in the area, you would expect in those core samples to see what you see in naturally occurring limestone. You would expect laminations, you would expect microfossils, maybe visible fossils, because it was presumably from ocean bottom. And what they found in the core samples was just the opposite of that. There were no laminations. The entire block appears to be homogeneous. That's not what you see in nature, when nature is laying those, year
layers
after year after year, the layers that go down. But they also found air bubbles, they found insects, and they found human hair. And when they did the chemical analysis, there were chemicals in the blocks that do not occur naturally. So the bottom line, I mean, this is a mind blower. This was 1989 when they found this. It is the question, how did they get massive blocks of such high tolerance fitting perfectly 400 feet above the surface? And I mean, if you watch the old movies and Charlton Heston, and Exodus, what you see is, a million slaves with ropes and log rollers, and they're rolling them up sand ramps and all that. And maybe that happened in some places later on. That very possibly could have happened later on. But that's not what happened with the three pyramids, the Great Pyramids on Giza. And what they found was, and what was published, and the pushback was tremendous, is that these stones are what are called, they're artificial stone. And the way they were created is they were, in fact, the stone itself was mined from nearby limestone quarries. It was then pulverized and mixed with a high-tech epoxy that allowed it to be plastic, kind of molten, or at least, soft, poured into molds. And then those molds, it was hardened, and the molds were poured on site. So that's why you could pour one block next to another and get 1/1000th of an inch tolerance. So, and I talk to people about this. I used to do a lot of programs on this, not so much anymore. But one of the questions people say, okay, well, what's the big deal? Artificial stone. Well, we didn't know really how to create this. So there's another interesting story that goes with this. In 1990, some of our viewers remember, the U.S. was about to invade Iraq in what was called the First Gulf War. I remember watching on TV. I was crying watching on TV. I didn't want to see it happen. Yeah. And there's a backstory to this. Saddam Hussein knew that America would, everybody knew because we broadcast that we were going to attack. He contacted an American artist who was using the technology that was used in the Great Pyramids. He contacted that artist because he wanted that technology to harden his bunkers before the U.S. forces attacked Iraq. He wanted that the epoxy-based stone so that he could harden those bunkers. And the U.S. got wind of this, U.S. government, and made it illegal. They forbade the artist from sharing his patented technology with Saddam Hussein that would have actually hardened those bunkers against the shock and awe that we were doing. So the point is, the technology that was used to build the pyramids was so advanced, we weren't even really doing it until the 20th century. And it had military applications that were recognized pretty quickly. And we still don't do it, and we still aren't using it heavily in our construction or anything like that right now. No, not in. There are some artists that are using this, but you don't see it in construction. So this was a mind blower to the scientific community in 1989, because all the textbooks say those blocks were carved and then somehow mysteriously moved into place. Now we go down just adjacent to the Giza plateau is the Great Sphinx. And I know most of our viewers are familiar with the Sphinx. And as a geologist, I was fascinated when I went there in '86, because what you see on the back of the Sphinx, on the rump, and this is a view that you don't often get in mainstream. They're always looking either a profile or right on in the face. But what you see is first of all, the Sphinx is carved from in place from a limestone bluff that was in place. So it's like there was a solid limestone bluff, and the Sphinx was carved, and then all the empty space around it is where the rock was cleared and moved away so that the Sphinx looks like this isolated, standing structure. So it was actually carved in place. When you go around to the back of the Sphinx on the rump, you see erosion marks that are about 12 feet deep in some places. And it's limestone. Limestone's a sedimentary rock. And when there are some parts of the limestone that are more resistant than others, and the softer parts are what get eroded away, creating these erosion marks. Well,
remember, you are born spiritual and I am born spiritual.